prosecution's case in the Wandon Clansman gang trial, as Chief Justice Brian Sykes ruled that the telephone recordings allegedly between gang members are admissible as evidence. A former gang member turned witness had previously testified he used 3 phones to secretly record conversations he had with other members through the use of a software application he downloaded. Several questions were previously raised as to the authenticity of these recordings and the credibility of the former gangster turned Crown witness.
As the details in this report.
Following days of submissions from the prosecution and the defense, Chief Justice Brian Sykes has ruled in favor of the Crown. Telephone recordings allegedly between members of the Wandon Clansman gang will be used against them in court. In making the decision, Chief Justice Sykes referenced several past judicial matters with similar circumstances dating back to 1993. Sykes ruled that the evidence from the former gang member who secretly recorded the conversations is sufficient to meet the required statutory standards of the Evidence Amendment Act 2015. Section 31G of the Act states that information produced by a computer, in this case a phone, shall only be admissible as evidence if at all times the device was fully functional. Previously, the defense argued on the basis that the Crown can't prove the devices and application used were fully functional and that the witness could have easily fabricated and altered the data before sharing it with the investigating officer. But Chief Sykes ruled that there was no indication that the application used to do the recordings was malfunctioning, nor was there anything to suggest that the witness manipulated the data. Additionally, he notes that the operation to download and use the call recording application does not require any expertise. Sykes says, quote, "We are in an era where smartphones are as common as anything and software applications are more user-friendly," end quote. Over the course of the trial, the defense has oftentimes brought into question the credibility of the Crown's 2 key witnesses who were former gangsters. In passing the ruling, Sykes noted that being an accomplice cannot rationally disqualify a witness from giving evidence, this in accordance to the Evidence Amendment Act 2015. The trial will reconvene on Tuesday at 10 a.m.
The former Don turned state witness in the ongoing Wandon trial will be back on the witness stand tomorrow. He's been recalled by the prosecution to explain conversations among the alleged gang members which he secretly recorded. In the meantime, Chief Justice Brian Sykes has accepted 3 transcripts of the recordings into evidence. But Attorney Lord McFarlane, who is representing alleged gang leader Andre Blackman Bryan, raised objections, arguing that the witness previously testified he had signed each document but they did not have his signature. But Justice Sykes dismissed his argument.
There was a heightened sense of expectation in the Supreme Court building this morning as the prosecution hit play on the recordings sometime after 10. The state witness this morning positively identified the cell phones which made the recordings. The Chief Justice urged the prosecution to get on with it. The alleged gangsters were reportedly alert with anticipation as the witness took up his position to identify the voices in the recordings. The reputed leader of the gang, Andre Blackman Bryan, listened intently as the prosecution rolled the tape. The tape is reportedly of a conversation that took place on April 23, 2019, between the witness and one of the defendants. After a brief conversation between the Registrar of the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice, the conversation between the alleged gangsters was played in open court.
Yo, wagwan. There. Me a try read G, but him look like him battery dead. Yeah, man, battery dead.
At this point, the witness positively identified one of the voices on the tape as, quote, Citypus. Citypus is listed in court documents as the alias of one of the 33 defendants in the trial, Jason Brown. G is listed as the alias of the alleged leader of the gang, Andre Blackman Bryan. The Chief Justice then ordered a case management conference and defendants were led out of the court. The trial has been adjourned until...
The conversation starts with Citypus and the witness who then adds Muma to the phone call. She enters the conversation saying,
"Good news, good news. Oh, I'm going at the car."
But it's not clear what the good news was. She later expressed her loyalty to the alleged leader of the Wandon faction of the gang, Andre Bryan, who she calls Hombre, or G.
I'll cut off my church because I want him comfortable. But no, him have to come out, you know. Them have to let him go. Never check for something still. I remain silent. Him can't make nobody know when him there when him come a road. Him know say me a no nonsense when it come to him, you know. Him have people around him when are loyal to him.
Some little boy we have to go link, man. Teach them the thing, cause, you know, the youth are the future.
You know, say him a the witness for Tesha case. A police me get that from.
Oh, the you say. You can't deal with dog like how you deal with junker. One day high, so you have to deal with junker on a higher level. No care how you deal with them a go you up. So me a go drive some fear in them.
Man say when him come a road, him not play with nobody. As them talk, them a get it.
I saw him have to do it. If him come back and play with them, a same thing will happen. Umbra come in yard, but after work for him come home.
At one point, the alleged gangsters discussed their alleged extortion racket, with the Citypus saying,
At the bus stop, everybody are dealing. It a go come under pressure, no matter how much money it make.
They also discussed the gang's finances, saying the gang's banker was refusing to release monies for members to take care of some businesses, for example, to pay attorneys to help secure their bail.
I beer short him short, man. I tell him to go mother. From Umber get him hold on the money. And him say we in a crisis and him nah let go the money. Every time him say him send the money, it'll take long and a beer story. I said that. Anyhow me there road, me have to get back my money.
The defendants were attentive while the recording played in open court. Brian, for the most part, held his head down, while Christy, for the entire recording, laid backwards with her head on the back of the bench and her arms folded across her chest.
Secret recordings between the former Don turned state witness and alleged gang members has the details in this report.
In the April 23, 2019 cell phone recording, Stephanie Christie was heard saying that she will be praying and fasting for the release of Andre Blackman Brand, who had been in police custody. That telephone call was between the state witness, one of the defendants identified as Citypus, and Miss Christie. Miss Christie said she used $60,000 from her salary to cover the legal expenses of an alleged gang member. At that time, she was an employee at the Ministry of Justice. While describing disloyal members of the gang, she described one of the defendants, who she referred to as Sickhead, as an idiot. She said he telephoned her requesting Andre Bryan's number. In the recording, she said she was nearly second in command to Citypus and described herself as being first and willing to conduct the gang's affairs at any time of the night. While the recording was being played, Miss Christie was seen clutching a notepad and taking notes. During the conversation, Citypus was disconnected. The witness reconnected him, at which point he said he agreed that members of the gang were disloyal. It was also revealed that the gang was in shambles and needed to recruit youngsters who Citypus said, quote, who no know nothing, end quote. He also said being a member of the criminal organization was a career. Interestingly, Citypus was in police custody when the conversation was recorded. At one point, he was heard hurling expletives and described the prosecution's first witness as a liar and a thief. While that section of the recording was being played, Mr. Brand was seen with his hands to his face. In the 77-minute recording, Stephanie Christie is also heard telling Citypus and the state witness that a police officer told her that a member of the Clansman gang was a witness against convicted gang leader Tesha Miller. Miss Christie, who is also referred to as Mama, said, quote, Ziggy a eyewitness pan Tesha, a police me get that from, end quote. Tesha Miller was sentenced in 2020 to 38 years and 9 months in prison for the murder of Jamaica Urban Transit Company chairman Douglas Chambers. The trial continues on Friday.
Are your career this, you inner this, you eat out of this. Would they have other program so them up and bad mind the thing and scrape for yourself? It'll deteriorate. Man now go road go look no side for a bad up.
There were chuckles in the courtroom as the prosecution quoted aspects of the expletive-laden conversation when posing questions to the witness. The witness explained that Citypus was outlining plans to rid the gang of the older members and train youngsters to become killers. He also explained that Citypus was concerned that the gang was deteriorating because individual members were trying to form their own gangs. He says the alleged gang member captured on the recording was concerned that not enough gangsters were finding additional sources of income for the gang to exploit. According to the witness, the gang operated on a system where a don for an area would determine who gets hired when persons from that area were doing construction developments. He says the don would go to the homeowner and inform them that they are to only hire 2 persons and the don would hire the rest. In the recording, Muma explains her rank among the alleged gangsters and spoke of the gang's effort to recruit new talent.
Remember saying me as a woman, I'm not afraid for going away. Remember saying me as second in command to Brown. I'm not just squeeze eye, but it's a boy we work. And the important thing is we need a driver. And him carry me go places hours a night and pick me up, man, and drop me off, man. And him could have do me things and him never do that.
Also in the recordings, a rivalry between alleged warring gangsters attempting to overtake a house in a Spanish Town community.
Cooks are there say you are winning already, Cause the people them they left them in charge and them the people that now look for come back here, so. To the liar dead, them they want to take the place, put them data in night.
A people place them want. Hear me I say no? Make them know say somebody go call them and make them know what time it is. Them can't use them style up and way. Get the number and make we chat to them. Cause the man them need some said way. Cause from me call them and tell them say Lucifer. I show me on the wing now. A bullism thing with upon right now.
The witness explained to the court that Citypus would use the name Lucifer when he approached people for extortion money. He says by saying he had no wings now, Citypus, who he says was behind bars at the time, meant he had no access to a cell phone.
No date is given for the conversation between the prosecution's star witness and the reputed leader of the feared criminal organization. A voice the witness identifies as Andre Blackman Bryan can be heard calling for men said to be his cronies to be reorganized.
Try get back the nigga them.
The witness told the court that Bryan was attempting to get the one-done faction of the gang back to full operating force. The conversation goes on to mention a policeman assigned in Spanish Town.
And mama send to them. She send to my boy there, Jim Brown. She tell me about termite. She ensure said the road clear. So when you come a road, the thing good. She called me and said, Banks, clear up. Them tell you how murder you charge for yet?
At this point, the voice identified as Bryan's responds.
Coming like a the one on the avenue. The one at Portmore. About 4 murder.
We think I the one from in a terminus. You don't have nothing to worry about.
The witness later explained that was not a corrupt policeman, but one who was trying to dismantle the gang. The witness told the court that Muma would go to him with information on gang members from an area known as Top Banks who she wanted off the streets. It is at this point the alleged gangsters begin discussing the country's anti-gang laws. The voice identified by the witness as Blackman's discusses the prospects of the case against him.
Watch you now, Boop. You see if somebody be a witness, them a feel in the gang for a time to be a good witness. And to say me split the gang from Miller are the wickedest thing. And at 2014 the law come in. So nothing before that can use against me.
The witness explained that Miller was in reference to Tesha Miller, and the law he was referencing was the anti-gang legislation. Bryan stared at the witness intently as he testified. At times, he briefly conversed with his co-accused.
Since the court started hearing the secretly recorded conversations, Christy has been laying backwards in her seat with her arms folded across her chest. At one point today, she sat upright while the witness explained the following conversation with Citypuss that was secretly recorded.
It's most house them a get a girl, you know, cause I can't voluntary work this up.
The witness explained that Citypuss believed Christy was the one sharing information with the police on the alleged gang members who were being detained. In another recording, the court today heard the first of the conversations the witness says he had with Andre Blackman Bryan, the man he says was the leader of the one-done faction of the gang. A voice the witness says was Bryan from behind bars can be heard calling for the men said to be his cronies to reorganize.
Try get back the nigga them.
The conversation goes on to mention a policeman assigned in Spanish Town.
And mama send to them. She send to my boy there, Jim Brown. She tell me about termite. She ensure said the road clear. So when you come a road, the thing good. She called me and said, Banks, clear up. Them tell you how murder you charge for yet?
At this point, the voice identified as Bryan's response.
Coming like a the one on the avenue. The one at Portmore. About 4 murder. We think I the one from in a terminus. You don't have nothing to worry about.
The witness later explained that the police was not a corrupt officer, but one who was trying to dismantle the gang. The witness told the court that Muma would go to him with information on the gang members from an area known as Top Banks, which he wanted off the streets. In the recording, the voice said to be that of Bryan spoke of the country's anti-gang laws.
Watch you now, Boop. You see if somebody be a witness, them a feel in the gang for a time to be a good witness. And to say me split the gang from Miller are the wickedest thing. And at 2014 the law come in. So nothing before that can use against me.
The witness explained that Miller was in reference to Tesha Miller, and the law he was referencing was the anti-gang legislation. Bryan stared at the witness intently as he testified. At times, Bryan also briefly conversed with his co-accused. The witness also detailed his betrayal of Bryan when he explained what he meant when he said in the recording,
And when my cousin called me, who dey on it, I saw me know. She say you pay 2.5 and the man collect your passport picture and you go over there.
The witness says Bryan thought he, the witness, was wanted by the police and never wanted him to get caught. He told the court he spoke with the police investigators he was working with at the time, and they crafted a plan to tell Bryan he could pay $2,500 and be recruited for a hard program. He says he told Bryan his cousin had told him about the program and would introduce him to a man who would do paperwork for him to travel overseas and to find employment using the hard qualifications. The Chief Justice asked the witness how he came by that information, and he said he did his research in order to be able to counter any suspicion that Bryan had.